great pleasure to introduce to you the 12th president of the College of New Rochelle, Dr. Steve Sweeny, who will be delivering an address entitled, Pushed and Pulled, Being a University Today.
Thank you very much, Rosa, and I too want to thank you for your leadership, for being my very special partner and responsible for our interaction with all of the alumni. You represent them very well. Congratulations on your own anniversary. As host, please, I say with considerable enthusiasm to all of you, welcome home. As president, I'm invited, as you know, sometimes elected, to represent the college in a variety of American higher education or charitable organizations, and I'm always honored to do so. It comes with the presidency. It comes with my wanting to tell the story of the College of New Rochelle. Well, it means I'm on the road a great deal, which I'm not complaining about. It does allow me to have a broader perspective on the university world. Right now, I'm a commissioner on our regional accrediting body, Middle States, and I'm a regular faculty member at the Harvard Institute for New University Presidents. I'm an officer of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, and I'm one of 2 Americans elected to the board of the International Federation of Catholic Universities. I serve on the board of 2 high schools, 1 other Catholic women's college, Alverno College in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've served on other Catholic women's college boards. I'm on a Catholic Social Service Agency board, Nursing Home at the Corner board, all of which are wonderful opportunities to serve, but are very clearly enriching opportunities for me, and I think for the college as well. I think it makes me be a better leader of the community to have those involvements. So from time to time, I'm asked to reflect on all these experiences, to say what's going on in the broad world around us. What can we reflect on? What is the context in which colleges and universities find themselves today? So the invitation to speak this morning asked me to do that, and I'm very pleased to do it. So the topic is the context of being university in the world today. And I'm going to use the term university to be inclusive of colleges and universities. It's a technicality because the truth is all of us are universities in the way we're structured. The state of New York and the state of Massachusetts are the 2 states of the union that do not permit a college like ourselves to use the term university. All the rest, long ago, by virtue of being undergraduate and graduate structured in schools, would have been universities. So I'm going to use the word university to include colleges and universities as you and I know them. Have 1 year to go in this job, as you know, and it reminds me both how little time I have today here, but what a short time the 35th year will be for me at the College of New Rochelle, my 14th as president, and brought me to a story. Some of you know the story of Winston Churchill. I've used it before, but it's very, very apt to the situation. Winston Churchill was on the stage waiting to be introduced, and an officious fellow at the microphone decided to get into sensitive territory and said, everybody knows Sir Winston's tendency to over-appreciate cognac and brandy. As a matter of fact, looking at a room this size, if the brandy and cognac Sir Winston has consumed this year were put into this room, it would be up here on the wall. It would come up to that height. Sir Winston, sitting in a view of the audience, looked at the line, the imaginary line on the wall, started to calculate with his fingers, and when he came to the microphone said, looking at the wall, "So much to do, such little time to do." That's my feeling about 1 year to go and about having 45 minutes at my disposal this morning. I thought a place to center ourselves to begin this discussion, or this explication really, is Cardinal Newman. September 19th, Cardinal Newman, that great figure coming out of the Oxford movement in England, will be beatified. September 19th, Benedict XVI will travel to Coventry for the proclamation that indeed John Henry Cardinal Newman is among the blessed in heaven. I don't think there's been any doubt about it, but how nice that we stop and celebrate it. The vice presidents don't know this yet, but as one of the officers of the International Federation of Catholic Universities, I've received a papal invitation to attend the beatification, and if I can make the schedule work, and I'll work hard at that, it will be my honor to be present at the beatification of John Henry Cardinal Newman, who is a central figure in the shaping of our understandings of universities. You remember John Henry Newman is a convert. John Newman was an enormously gifted writer who wrote every sentence in his life, wrote every sentence 8 times to get a precision of thought and economy to his communications. At a moment in time after his conversion to Roman Catholicism, the Irish bishops invited him, commissioned him to form the Catholic University of Ireland in Dublin. And the idea of a university, that great document, the great volume which has been produced, collecting together all of his discourses, getting ready to get the university underway, is one of the masterpieces. And I thought it was worth our time this morning just to hear a bit of Newman's idea of the university. And these are quotes. What is a university? If I were asked to describe as briefly and as popularly as I could what a university was, I should draw my answer from its ancient designation of a studium generale, or school of universal learning. This description implies the assembly of strangers from all parts into one spot. From all parts. How will you find professors and students from every department of knowledge? And in one spot. Else how could there be any school at all? Accordingly, in its simple and rudimental form, it is a school of knowledge of every kind, consisting of teachers and learners from every quarter. Many things are requisite to complete and satisfy the idea embodied in this description. But such as this, a university seems to be in its essence, a place for the communication and circulation of thought by means of personal intercourse through a wide extent of country. It's a place in which the intellect may safely range and speculate, sure to find its equal in some antagonistic activity, and its judge in the tribunal of truth. It's a place, the university, where inquiry is pushed forward and discoveries verified and perfected, and rashness rendered innocuous, and error exposed by the collision of mind with mind and knowledge with knowledge. It's a seat of wisdom, a light of the world, a minister of faith, an alma mater of the rising generation. It is this, concludes Newman, and a great deal more, and demands a somewhat better hand and head, says Newman, than mine, to describe it well. And Newman concludes in his conversations with the Irish bishops. Such is a university in its idea and in its purpose. Such, in good measure, has it before now been in fact. Shall it ever be again? We're going forward under the strength of the cross, under the patronage of the Blessed Virgin, and in the name of St. Patrick, to attempt it. Glorious definition of the university. The nobility of the enterprise of the university, I think, is also dramatically underscored in one of my favorite quotes, which describes the procession of scholars, which is what the university is as well. The poet laureate of England, John Masefield. Masefield said, "There are few earthly things more beautiful than a university, where those who hate ignorance may strive to know, where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see." There are few earthly things more splendid. What comes to mind is Victor Hugo, the writer, great social activist. There is one thing stronger than all the armies in the world, an idea whose time has come. And the idea of the university is central to us as civilized human beings. Its idea came long ago, the founding of the early universities in Salamanca and Bologna, in Paris, later Oxford. What's particularly noteworthy, and here I really begin, is the dramatically different manifestations of this idea throughout history. In our own lifetimes and in our own nation, the different manifestations of the idea of the university. If we had the time, we could stroll and hear about Bologna and Salamanca. We could hear about the transformation of the teaching-learning mode through history, which was basically one-on-one tutorials, now to the simultaneous method of teaching, learning in groups, the precursors of our seminar model. The privileged of all times, of course, always had the tutors. But in Europe, for instance, the transformation of education to the simultaneous method promoted extraordinary general access to literacy and some computational functioning. In church circles, he says with some care, the Jesuits were associated in their early educational mission with a tutorial form of instruction. Eventually, the more active men's orders and then women's orders arose to provide a broader scope of education for a wider audience. All of that part of the evolution of the idea of the university. In our land, in our history, relatively recent history of 300 or 400 years, let me present two models of university which must be acknowledged as important incarnations of university to be reckoned with. The first model. He understood, quote, that knowledge is power, that knowledge is safety, that knowledge is happiness. It's important to remember this thought of Thomas Jefferson. In his lifetime, there was no system of public education. Only the children of wealthy families could receive the tutoring required to attend a university. Only the wealthy members of society could achieve positions of leadership. Jefferson felt strongly that the control of power by the wealthy posed a threat to America's democracy. Jefferson then took his ideas and early experiences about education and concluded that the practice of housing students, faculty, classrooms, dining halls in some single large building, which had been the case, was not a satisfactory arrangement. In fact, a university should not be a house, but should be a village, an academical, educational village. Academical village was Jefferson's term. So after retiring from the presidency, he thought about the ideal university. He even spent some time designing it. He personally transformed those ideas into the reality of the University of Virginia. He designed a university whose physical presence and course of studies would produce an educated citizenry capable of defending the freedom and democracy which he wanted in the United States. Jefferson not only drew the architectural plans, but also made the 4-mile trip between his home Monticello and the university on horseback almost every day to oversee the construction. The elder statesman was attentive to detail as he was to the concept. He stipulated, for instance, I love this one, that the university's bronze bell have an acoustical range of 2 miles. Now, you know the design of the University of Virginia. It was a quadrangle with one end of the quadrangle missing. At one end of the quadrangle, a huge rotunda-like building, which was architecturally copying the Pantheon in Rome. It was the library, and it began with 7,000 books. The 2 rows then of buildings, or the 2 rows of a building, which came down from the rotunda, were each separate apartments for a faculty member on the 2nd floor, and underneath a meeting space for that faculty member to meet with his classes, his, of course. And his students would have been his students. Because faculty members had to have access to students and so on. But the point being that this was a village unto itself. This was to be a residential community where the life of the mind was to be primary, and in whatever form teaching, learning took place was to be on that property, the educational, academical village. And as you know now, so the university that he founded was the prototype of the educational village. That model is very familiar to us. That's the model that prevailed in this country for so long. That students, prospective students, would go to a residential program. Even in our lifetime, gradually, universities were accepting of commuter students. But the model that really dominated was the residential model of university, as best typified by all the work Thomas Jefferson put into it. Let me illustrate a second university. This university has the largest student body in North America. It has a current enrollment of 420,000 undergraduate students, 78,000 graduate students, and about 224 full-time equivalent students when you put that all together. This university, American, has more than 200 campuses worldwide and confers degrees in over 100 degree programs at the associate's, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels. It has an open admission policy requiring proof of a high school diploma, the GED or its equivalent. The school provides associate's, bachelor's degree applicants, opportunity for advanced placement through a prior learning assessment program, which aside from previous coursework, college credit can come from experiential learning essays, corporate training, and certificates or licenses. You know what university I'm describing, yes? The University of Phoenix is a private, for-profit institution of higher learning. It's wholly owned subsidiary of Apollo Group Incorporated, which is a publicly traded corporation on NASDAQ, an S&P 500 corporation based in Phoenix. John Sperling, its founder, who experimented in the early 70s in San Jose University in California, is quoted as saying, maybe unfair to take a quote out of context, but is quoted as saying that the university was, quote, a corporation, not a social entity. Coming here is not a rite of passage. We're not trying to develop students' value systems or go in for that business of expand their minds. The first class consisted of only 8 students. He founded the university in 1976. 1980, the school expanded to San Jose, California. Then by 1989, the university was among the first providing an online program for students. Almost all of the programs of Phoenix are now conducted and almost totally online. That school, University of Phoenix, was the top recipient of student financial aid funds for the 2008 fiscal year, receiving nearly $2.48 billion for students enrolled. And due to a great deal of political activity on their part, some of the regulations of the Department of Education in Washington have now accepted this model of university as fully the equal of the residential model. I'm giving you 2 models of higher education as we now have come to know them. There was an interesting little piece in the paper the other day, maybe you saw it. I came across it at a meeting. I hadn't seen it in the newspaper, but the headline was, Walmart to offer its workers a college program. The first paragraph, the purveyors of inexpensive jeans and lawnmowers is dipping its toe into the online education waters, working with a web-based university to offer its employees in the United States affordable college degrees. A little bit more of the morphing of the University of Physics model. Well, my 2 illustrations, my Walmart footnote 2, were meant to describe the spectrum of universities which constitute the American higher education scene today. Seems like an enormous gulf, doesn't there, between Charlottesville, Virginia, and the ubiquitous Phoenix University of Phoenix. But this is the American higher education scene. It changes at a gallop. The vast majority of American students are not 18 to 22 years old. They're not experiencing the academical village scene. That possibility, that experience has been made distant for some now, as costs and the need to work to meet these costs don't allow for the luxury for so many to enjoy Mr. Jefferson's vision. But the idea of the university, that idea whose time has come, I believe, in human civilization, endures in a variety of forms and settings, and those called to promote the mission of this idea of the university into the future need to navigate, need to negotiate, borrowing a word from my dear friend, Sister Alice, who wrote that wonderful volume, Negotiating Identity. Need to navigate or negotiate, need to moderate, maybe need to endure. There are many verbs. The pushes and the pulls of the society around us as part of doing business. And that, of course, was the title of this lecture this morning, Pushed and Pulled, being university today. It could have been the tumult and the shouting, but that was already taken. It could have been the agony and the ecstasy, but that was already taken. Quick glance at the Chronicle of Higher Education this week. That's our industry newspaper. The headlines give you the sense of the issues going on around us. American colleges look to private sector for global recruiting. Story about colleges turning over their recruiting to private corporations. The Virginia Attorney General's inquiry could cast a chill over scholarly research. A miserable story. about a political agenda being pursued through the funding of research at Virginia called Casting a Pall over legitimate research. Another headline, despite widespread support, Perkins Loan Program, that glorious assist to students in need, faces an uncertain future in Congress. Then you may have seen, and this happens from time to time, but more with greater strength at the moment, indefinite strike halts classes and research at the University of Puerto Rico, very prestigious university, which is now shut down, 11 campuses, and as a commissioner that accredits them. No telling tales out of school here, but having lost a semester, they're in deep trouble. They're likely, as this prestigious university, to lose their accreditation because you can't have your university not function, even if it's not in your control. So, universities are citizens of various concentric circles in the world. We're in the world of the civic world, the nation, the world, community. We're citizens, universities. We're inextricably connected then to what goes on in Congress, to what goes on in state legislatures, what goes on for us, what goes on in the New York City government, what goes on in Rochelle. And therefore, I'm first describing us as citizens of the civic world. We can throw up our hands in frustration and mock the dysfunctionality of government, but we don't get a choice. We have to be vigilant as university about the public policy coming out of dysfunctionality. Some of the public policy is toxic to American higher education, some enormously facilitating of our mission. As a president today, a board, university community, we all have to stay alert, focused on issues of public policy. The newspapers recently around us here decided to point to universities' use of Washington and Albany lobbyists who function on our behalf. Even when you have inside your institution significant staff paying attention with expertise and the time and attention to keep relationships going in Washington and so on, sometimes you still need professional help. In the form of professional associations, we belong to a good number of those, or even lobbying companies that have access. It's the way life works in public policy formulation. So for us at CNR, with 6 full campuses, 6 members of Congress therefore, with 2 senators in the state of New York, 6 state assemblywomen, 6 state senators, New York City Council members, New Rochelle City government to pay attention to, we keep ourselves pretty attentive. So our vigilance is particularly focused on issues of financial aid. 90% of our students are financial aid recipients. Legal, regulatory requirements change all the time in matters of employment law, immigration, privacy, health and safety, and on and on and on. University legal counsel today is indispensable. Attorneys of necessity occupy a considerable part of our attention, and universities are very well served in this. You know as well as I do the climate around us lately in the big picture. The Association of Governing Boards, one of the associations that helps us, each year provides universities with the association's sense of the current federal and state public policy issues affecting higher education. Dominating the climate for all of us. For universities, I'm not saying like it or not, just dominating, is the change of the United States President and administration. The severe recession, an unprecedented federal stimulus package to revitalize the economy, a rigorous debate on health care reform brought to closure in major reform legislation, a growing federal deficit, and a growing awakening to the size of the federal deficit, continuing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the war against terrorism, That's the climate in which universities find themselves, just as you, as citizens, find yourself. And lately, adding to the mix, the economic turmoil in Europe, and God help us, our most recent environmental disaster, our worst ever. How do universities get through all of this? It's a time of, so we also operate in the concentric circle, if you will, the community of American higher education. And I'm going to say a little bit more of a word about that now, but understand that in the civic world, the dramatic changes that are likely for American higher education. There's continued scrutiny by state and federal policymakers of higher education's costs, our effectiveness, our accountability, and degree production. The states are struggling financially to support higher ed, while the federal government is using its borrowing power to spend billions of new dollars on education and research. Have you heard of the federal program called Race to the Top? It's billions of dollars of federal stimulus money now available to the states through a grant application process. But in order to receive the grant, you must have met certain educational policy criteria. You must evaluate your teachers a certain way. You must not have any restrictions in the number of charter schools that you can have in your state. A number of things like that to make you eligible. The states are jumping as fast as they can to make those educational policy decisions to be available for this federal money. In our case, New York State, $700 million. It's very, very seductive, and it is driving educational policy. So I think if you talk over your drink tonight, you'll find that some are optimistic that the recession is easing and the economy is turning a corner. Pressures on endowments and endowment spending policies look to be reduced in those major universities that had such troubles. And until Europe took its tailspin, that all seemed to be moving in the right direction. But others you will find over the drink are more cautious for the economy and higher ed as federal stimulus money is spent and state collections remain low. It's the combination of federal and state that allows us to move into the future. What is certain, certainty is I think the worth of the college degree is going to remain critically important to the futures of individuals and to the future of the nation. And so there'll always be a huge crowd trying to solve these problems. And those of us in the university world, believe it's worthwhile to be enduring the pushes and the pulls in the civic world. So it's my belief that for some time to come, the life of the universities are going to be continually shaped by continuing pressures from the U.S. economy, heightened scrutiny of nonprofit organizations, greater demands for accountability, the shortcomings of the nation's K through 12 educational system will continually land on the doorstep of higher ed, and the demographically changing workforce needs to be provided with education appropriate to the needs of the 21st century. All of that is going to shape us. All of it does shape us. Universities, though, are also citizens of higher education community itself, and I report on this as a commissioner of the accrediting body. One of my responsibilities as a commissioner is to receive all the applications for substantive change. That's the term. Substantive change in universities already accredited. There are hundreds of requests for substantive change in the 580 universities that make up the Middle States region in a 3-month period. Hundreds. And they sound like this. Approval of contractual agreements and partnerships with corporations, with other universities, with for-profit organizations. Their requests for universities to begin additional locations, new campuses, new sites. It's requests for universities to have new degree levels, not just individual programs, I'm talking about new degree levels. Dominating the substantive change requests is alternate delivery methods. That is, we want to offer our whole nursing program online. We want to run our whole School of Business online. Alternate delivery methods. International locations, big deal. NYU has this enormous investment in a spectacular new campus in Abu Dhabi. Going on all around us, and branch campuses, as I say. The explosion of technology is revolutionizing the teaching, learning environment. It's cost intensive, it's training intensive for faculty. You know that students are dramatically different today. The social networking activity is mind-blowing. Facebook and all of the other allied. And I don't do any of that as a negative. I'm naming it as a reality. The disciplines, each of the disciplines of higher education, there are breakthroughs, dramatic breakthroughs that have to be kept up with, new methodologies in disciplines. The internet, we've complained over years about this, and what's the point? We just have to accept the responsibilities that go with this. The indiscriminate use of information, as if it were gospel, because it appears on the internet. Faculty members have to deal with that regularly. So the change of the role of the faculty member in higher education, from expert standing in front of a class, because you can get that information that the faculty member possesses in so many places, to an evolution to facilitator, where the faculty member is the guide, the director of the acquisition of information, and the arbiter of what is good, solid, factual information versus what is basically made up. The third and last concentric circle in which we operate to talk about today is the church. We proudly claim our place as Catholic college, as Catholic university. The context inside the church brings its own problems, its own challenges, its own opportunities. You know, John Paul II in 1990, with people like Sister Alice Gowan with us today, formed and shaped a wonderful document defining Catholic higher education called Ex Corde Ecclesiae, from the heart of the church. Universities are born out of the heart of the church. We got into later tensions about that document by the American application. Sister Alice has some wonderful material about that too. This, though, is the era of Benedict XVI. This is the era of Joseph Ratzinger, who has a very long history, from Peritus at the Second Vatican Council to Pope, 5 years now. And I think it's fair to say what we are experiencing now in these 5 years is a broad social agenda for the church, but a narrower liturgical doctrinal agenda than we had been experiencing, because the Pope speaks of reform of the reform. The Pope says he is comfortable. Again, I'm really not trying to be judgmental or negative. I'm quoting. The Pope says smaller, purer church could be better for us. And the constant, lately, dialogue and kind of more heated than that on whether Vatican II represents continuity or discontinuity with the traditions of the church. We live in a time where one has to acknowledge out loud, including the Pope today in the New York Times apologizing more strongly than ever for the scandals of the church. One has to acknowledge that the moral voice of the church is muffled by controversy and scandal. That when we grew up, all of us grew up with, when there was a moral issue, one immediately turned to the voice of the church for clarification. It is not happening around us as we grew up with. The U.S. context, and I know this from sitting around the table with my colleagues from around the world. There are 18 of us on the board of the International Federation, 2 or 3 from each continent. And I describe our situation because part of this is to be experiencing universal church and to be comfortable with knowing what's going on. Ours in North America is a church fragmented. One has to say that, as evidenced by the reactions to the President of the United States at Notre Dame University. And so in describing that to international colleagues, it is a source of confusion, because in the other continents of the world, they don't ever expect the world leader to necessarily be functioning within the moral tradition of the church, and they still have to continue interactions. So that was really surprising for them to hear the discussion around the president's visit and honorary degree at Notre Dame. And they all said back, you describe a fragmented church is what you're describing. We don't have that. What we have are enormous issues of survival of the church in Asia and in Africa, in interacting with the Muslim world, in interacting with fundamentalists who want to shut us down in India and so on. That's what we spend our time on. You seem to spend it on other things in your country. Right now there are 2 projects before the American bishops which will affect us. One is a review of how we're all doing with Ex Corde Ecclesiae. Now 10 years into the American implementation, there's a review process that the bishops are conducting, which we don't quite understand what that is, but it's happening. And then Cardinal George, who's president of the American bishops, has put together a commission on the role of the bishops in American higher education. And again, we really don't know much about that, but I'm sure we will have to navigate, negotiate, as they say. You know the changes of demographics in the American church. By the year 2050, half the American church will be Hispanic. Are church institutions prepared for that? Decline of religious personnel is obvious to us all. The decline in level of religious formation, and the attitudes of Catholic people, and the change of the attitudes. The question of, I really am more comfortable being spiritual than I am in being religious. That's one of the attitudinal changes, measurable in American Catholic people, worth a great discussion sometime. Maybe that's your second drink tonight. The level of education of Catholic people is so far advanced. You know, we're able to think through a great deal of complex, complicated issues without having to be directed. It changes the nature of who we are and of universities. Okay. Moving right along here. So what I've said so far is that the university is shaped by the concentric circles around it. That's my point. What's going on in the world of the nation, what's going on in the American higher education scene, what's going on in the state of the church in the world and here in America. And I use the word shaped. It's probably, they're better words. Sometimes it's built up by those things. Sometimes we're torn down. Sometimes we are extinguished, the university, by those forces. So we're pushed and pulled. Maybe we always were pushed and pulled, but I think it's pushed and pulled now more than any time in our American history. To live, of course, is to change, and to change often. So we navigate, we negotiate, we accommodate. but I do think Newman would be astounded. Mr. Jefferson, too, would seek in vain his academical village when he looked around the American higher educational scene. But I want to provide you with one other illustration of university. This university is 107 years old. Primarily a teaching institution, it confers undergraduate and master's level degrees. 10% of its student body is aged 18 to 22. 90% are adults, 22 years on to almost 90. Returning to higher education after some time lapse is either for the first undergraduate degree, that's the vast majority, or a master's degree, a first undergraduate degree or master's degree, which for many is an important professional credential. Some come for a second degree, some come for postmaster's education. This university, in the fall of 2009, had a student body just under 5,000. The university I speak of, the student body comes principally from a 50-mile radius, which has been true for most of its history, although there are significant exceptions from students from a variety of states and countries on the international scene. In addition to the diversity of age already described, this university's student body is diverse in color and ethnic background, socioeconomic status, in religion. It's diverse in preparation for college, and although never surveyed, and appropriately never surveyed, one would surmise in this student body there's a diversity in sexual orientation, consistent with the general population. Residents are provided for the 18 to 22-year-old student. Fewer than 300 live on campus, but of the traditional age population, that's 60%, which has been pretty typical of this university's history. For curricular program reasons, the university is structured in schools. There are 4, each led by an academic dean and each with its own standing faculty and instructional staff. The library, too, is led by a dean and staffed by librarians who are considered full members of the faculty. The teaching learning activity takes place at 6 full campuses, 1 principal campus and 5 branch campuses. This university offers its full degree programs at the branch campuses as is authorized. The campuses are located where the university students live and work, thus facilitating access to higher education. By now, you have suspected that I'm describing the College of New Rochelle. A model, not a perfect model to be sure, but a model of adaptation to the signs of the times. And our whole history is one of adaptation and change, never more so than these years from 1969 on. 1968-69, discussions on coeducation and the future of the college led to experimentation with a residential college program in a residence hall, which led to, in a few years, some other manifestations which we'll describe of the university model. But by 69, in an atmosphere ripe for creativity and experimentation, the State Education Department invites us to take our undergraduate strengths and to expand them to master's level work, particularly in art, psychology, education. The State Education Department was inviting experimentation. Our faculty was eager to be experimental. Within quick order, after establishing master's programs, the 1970s brought for us the invitation to take the liberal arts program, with which we were both keeping our traditional women's program and experimenting, and offer it here for adult women. And very quickly, within weeks, having had that in place, the District Council 37 Municipal Employees Union says to us, would you offer that program for our members? members, your liberal arts BA program for our members where we work? I said, yes. If you honor our quality control, it's our program. It's your place, but our program. 40 years ago. Then Co-op City. If our workers in DC 37 live in Co-op City in the Bronx, why couldn't you do the program there, where they live? So we began at Co-op City, and very soon, taking from another college, a pre-existing program, we began in the South Bronx, the John Cardinal O'Connor campus. Adults coming back, having interrupted their education for a full baccalaureate degree in liberal studies. New York Theological, a wonderful part of our mission, preparing a street community clergy with an undergraduate degree. The Rosa Parks campus in Harlem, coming out of community activists asking us to make a contribution of education to the Harlem community. And most recently, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Restoration Plaza, where in the heart of that wonderful Bedford-Stuyvesant restoration community is a full 4-year college program. 1976, mission connected. Why not do a school of nursing? Why not do a nursing program? 1976, the diploma schools all around us are closing. It's no longer the chosen way to educate nurses. The privileged credential now is the bachelor's degree in nursing, we're told, in 76. So we started with that encouragement. Generic program, post-secondary. RNs coming back for the BSN. We do a master's in nursing. All of this evolved from 1976, and now postmaster's second degree programs. It's astounding to hear our graduation statistics. From our first graduation in 1908 with 9 graduates, to our most recent, May 27th, 2010, the College of New Rochelle has conferred 49,435 degrees. The college conferred about 9,500 degrees in its total history from 1908 to 1971, when the first 4 master's degrees were added to our statistics. So 9,500 for our whole history until 1971. The number, of course, from 71 to now has simply grown by leaps and bounds. May 27th of this year at Radio City, we graduated 1,204. So altogether, from 1908 to now, 49,400. Because I sign every diploma, it happens to be a very sacred religious thing for me as president, I asked, how many have I signed in my 13 years as president? So from July 1st, 1997 to today, I have signed 19,945 from the School of Nursing, from the Graduate School, from Arts and Sciences, from the School of New Resources. It is important statistics in talking about the life of higher education today, its many manifestations, our experimentation. The past 40 years have been marked for us with expansion and diversification. I think dramatic response to the signs of the times while being faithful to mission. So literally, my last word is about mission. People ask me, how do you keep this all together? Me, yes, the college community. The diversity that I've described, the pushing and the pulling, the expansion and diversification. How does this all hold together? 6 campuses, the dispersion geographically. How do you keep it all together? And there really is a very quick, very solid answer. And the answer is around faithfulness to mission. This year, the Ursulines celebrate 475 years. Literally on November 25th, 2010, it will be 275 years since the foundress, St. Angela, gathered her first followers to sign the book of the company, pledging to stay together, coming each day from their homes, and then going back out into the streets after praying and meditating together to take care of basically women and children, committed to the full development of these people. We draw from those 475 years of commitment to the full development of people. Out of our history, we've named non-negotiables that have to be present for us to be truly the College of New Rochelle, manifested in many different ways over the 107 years. But these non-negotiables need to be present 25 years from now, 100 years from now. We call these our non-negotiables. It's our mission. The primacy of the liberal arts, a full, solid liberal arts sciences education. That's for us. That's for the Ursuline animating spirit, which we draw from their history. That's what it means, the full development of people. We have a special commitment to women. That's one of our non-negotiables. By law, we are only allowed to be single-sex in the School of Arts and Sciences, which predates the change of the law. It predated, you could keep it single-sex. Anything after that, professional, graduate, new programs, has to be coeducational. It's simply the state of the law. But the ethos of the college is the special commitment to women. And we are Catholic. We find strength and nourishment from the Catholic intellectual tradition, from the Catholic moral tradition, from the Catholic social justice tradition. That's where we draw our strength. That's a non-negotiable. And we are committed to the building of community. Community now in the world in which we live, drawn from diversity. And all of that in our commitment to students prepares them to be leaders, prepares them to be not simply coping with the world around them, but changing the world, getting at societal change as an important outcome of their education with us. It's the commitment to those non-negotiables, which we call mission. It is the commitment to drawing our strength from the history of the 475 years of the Ursulines that sustains us and makes this possible. Makes possible a rational reaction to the pushes and pulls of being university today. And so I say, as I say regularly to the faculty and staff, here at the college, you're not here for a job. There are easier ways to make money. You're here because it's a vocation, it's a calling. And this is hallowed territory. That's how we handle the pushes and the pulls. How nice to be together with you.